Hey Anand, hey Richa.
Hello, everyone. I'm Richa Kumar, Senior Director of Software Engineering here at GitHub. I focus on education and integrations. It's a pleasure to be here today and to be talking to Anand Chowdhary, who's the creator of Karuna 2020, an inspiring story during these pandemic times. We are about a year into what has now become a new normal. COVID-19 has had a significant impact around the world. But alongside all the uncertainty and the severity, we have also seen heartwarming and inspiring initiatives by a global and eclectic set of people, be it scientists, policymakers, government officials, concerned citizens, or developers. And they've all been working together at a feverish pace to help alleviate some of the impact of this pandemic. There has been widespread and open collaboration around COVID-19, and it has taken many shapes and forms, from collaborative data repositories to apps that provide and gather local information to help the public, to faster application of scientific methods through collaboration, and even DIY devices. Many of these are not really your traditional software projects, and yet so many have been able to leverage GitHub's collaboration platform that makes it easier for people around the world to work together towards a common goal. So on that note, I want to extend a warm welcome to Anand, who's here today to tell us more about Karuna 2020, an initiative to help those that are most affected by COVID-19 in India. Anand and his team brought together startups, corporates, and nonprofits, and partnering together, they collected donations that helps them to build a dry ration kit that could sustain a family for about a month. And thus far, they've been able to help 12,000 people and been able to distribute 1 lakh masks to frontline workers. Indeed, an inspiring story, Anand. And so, over to you. We are eager to hear more about how this journey started, where we are along the way, and specifically how technology and GitHub has helped you in your efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. It just happened to be. It was not well planned in the beginning. I usually live in the Netherlands, and I came back to India because I was like, it's lockdown season. You're gonna work from home anyway, so why be away from family?
Good time to be with the family.
And I was like, okay, let me just get a flight ticket, maybe couple weeks, if not more. But then that turned into a couple months, and then even longer. And now it's been almost exactly a year that I've been here. And in fact, I'm gonna go back in about 10 days. Finally, I got the flight tickets back. But so when I came here for the first time, I was doing my 10-day quarantine period. I think it was 2 weeks back then, as soon as I landed. And my uncle, who runs Unifiers, which is a social infrastructure company where they focus on, training and skilling people of India, he came to me and he said, there's not that much different in our life. We're working from home, we live in air-conditioned apartments, but there are so many migrant workers out there. So these are people who come from villages and smaller cities in India who find daily labor jobs where they earn money day to day, almost like hand to mouth. And now that there is a nationwide lockdown in place, they don't have work anymore. And because of the lockdown also, they cannot go back home. So they're stuck here in the cities with literally no idea how they're going to feed their family tonight. And so from this place of privilege, is there anything that we can do? And for me, I'm a technology entrepreneur. My whole background is in startups. I've been building companies since I was in school, through university now. And so for me, it's always like, oh, okay, there's a problem. I'm going to build an app for that, right? There's always a technological solution in mind. But of course, you have to kind of focus on the real grassroots work. And so how we started is I was like, okay, let's see who's in my friend circle. And so we built a dream team almost of students and entrepreneurs, professionals in corporate, startups, journalists, just volunteers in general. And we decided we're going to get on a Zoom call every morning and then see what we can do about this. So I started with building just a GitHub organization and said, okay, let's get started from here. So let me quickly share my screen, and then I'm going to show you the repo.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I started like I do with all of my products, right? Let's just build a GitHub organization, and we started by building a website for Karuna 2020. This is our website. It's a pretty simple place where you can get all the information about the impact, about all the data, about what we're working on right now, and like you earlier said, we decided that the best way to tackle this problem is to build a dry ration kit. This is a meal kit which consists not of pre-cooked food, but of things like rice and lentils and salt and oil. And a kit that costs less than $10 can feed a family of 4 for a whole month. So we decided that we want to raise money and make these kits and distribute them as much as we can. Just a little bit about the site, in case you're curious. It's based on Emergency Site, which is an open source project that came out right during the pandemic, with the idea that we might want to build websites that we want to be super fast in emergencies if people are quickly looking at them from their 2G internet smartphones. So it has things like just one critical request with all inline CSS and so on. And so we built on these great open source projects for our website and in general our technology.
Great. And I know that in Karuna 2020, you use a lot of GitHub action workflows for automating common tasks that are otherwise manual and tedious and time consuming, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd love to tell you more about that. In fact, I want to tell you a quick story first, because in the beginning, it was, like I said, it was a Zoom call and a bunch of volunteers. And we would just have this big Google Sheet where we would just have all of the data coming in, what are the donations coming in, where are we buying the food from, how do we assemble the kit, and then how do we distribute it? And it was just one huge sheet. And imagine like how messy that spreadsheet can be. And so my friend and volunteer, Shivek, wrote this article about how he likes to call it Clojure's concurrency model, helped us kind of fix this. And so this is what he calls like the first version of our runtime, where everything's kind of running in a JavaScript main thread, where we call these async functions, which get data in and bring data out. But this can get very messy very fast. So we decided that we want to kind of switch to a Clojure concurrency model. And if you're interested, you should go through this article. I have a link in the discussion. But how we switched gears was now everything is kind of happening in CDs in sets. So just imagine a donor lifecycle model where we receive information about a new donation coming in, and then we would say, okay, we will identify the donor, we would move it to a column which says ready for receipts, and then we would use, for example, an automated GitHub Actions workflow, which would generate a receipt. So let me actually show you how this works in Airtable, which is the client we use to make this work. So for example, a new donation comes in here in uncategorized, and then we move it to need to contact, and then we would use an API to send them a message, we would contact them, and then when we move this card to ready for generating receipt, we run a GitHub Actions workflow which runs Puppeteer, which is a headless Chromium automation tool, which generates a PDF. Because in India, for example, when you contribute to a nonprofit, you get an ATG tax receipt, which you can use for your taxes to claim that as a deductible. But of course, we didn't want to do all of this work manually, because the goal was all of the manual work should be limited to focusing on real grassroots distributions. So then we move it, and then that's the whole how the system works. Another good example is distribution, because we use the same logic. We get uncategorized leads from people, and then we ask them to make a list of phone numbers or Aadhaar cards so that we can know that it's a real distribution. There are real people in this part of town who need our help. And then we approve the request, assign a distributor, deliver it. And one important thing for us was transparency, because if we're asking people to give us money and we're saying we're going to feed people, we need some evidence. And so we decided that for every single person who gets a Karuna 2020 dry ration kit, we would ask to take their photo. And so after the delivery, we move it into the received distribution pictures column, and we attach all the photos that we received. So of course, this is a privacy issue, right? So we decided that we want to blur their faces at least. So for example, this is a real photo of a real person getting our kit. And again, using a GitHub Actions workflow, we use a Python library called Face Blur, a custom version of it, which takes all of these photos in automatically, blurs them out, and then uploads them to our CDN. So we created a GitHub repository called Karuna 2020/open data, because we wanted to make sure that we are accountable to our donors and everyone gets access to all of our data. So how it works is literally the same data that we have here in Airtable using a GitHub Actions scheduled workflow shows up here as API endpoints. So for example, if you look at the API endpoint for donations.json, you can literally see every single donation, where it came from, who gave it to us, how much was it for, and the same with distributions and so on. And all of this happens completely automatically, in this case, using a GitHub Actions workflow that takes data from Airtable and then generates JSON endpoints. And then we publish this entire repository on a GitHub Pages static website with which you can consume these API endpoints. So everything happens automatically. And that's kind of a little bit about our tech with the GitHub Actions workflows.
Thanks, Anand. That makes a lot of sense. It's great to see this level of transparency and authenticity that's also getting built in, into the system, because I can totally see how that will build the trust and the confidence among the people who would like to contribute in the form of donations and really see their money, reaching the right people. And really, it's wonderful to see that GitHub Actions has helped you to automate these workflows and make you more efficient so that you're able to focus on what you do best. And just great to see that. So what do you see as some of the next set of challenges ahead, and how can the community contribute?
Yeah, I think the community has been such a large part of what we're doing here. Whenever I'm free, I just like to browse through the GitHub topic for COVID-19 and then just kind of scroll around to see what people are up to. And there are such great resources out there. Some of my favorite ones are the COVID-19 data repo from the New York Times, which, as it turns out, also uses a little bot, which uses GitHub Actions to fetch data from all of these different sources and then give it to you in an easily consumable state-wise US data way. Another repo that I really like is COVID-19 India React, which is a React website written also by a set of volunteers around the world. And this is what it looks like. You can go to their little website and you can see all the cases, state-wise data, find information about vaccination, get trends. It's a really fast, really nice site written entirely in React by a group of contributors from around the world. And I want to highlight one more, which is Karuna CLI, because this is especially interesting to developers. It's made by my friend and fellow GitHub star, Ahmad. And as the name implies, it's literally a command line interface where you can get data about the coronavirus, city-wise, country-wise, state-wise, in your terminal. So if you're a developer, you don't even need to leave your terminal to get up-to-date statistics. So I think the community is really coming together, and people. It's so amazing to see all of these people from around the world come together and trying to contribute to open source and make sure everyone has access to the right data, transparent data. And people are all doing this from their homes in their free time in a volunteer-led effort. And so I think really the solution to all of these challenges of finding, honest data in mitigating the pandemic, with even if you look at vaccination data, is all of these volunteer-led efforts that make all of this information that is typically, gate kept and make it open source.
That sounds great. And I believe you mentioned that as part of Karuna 2020 as well, you have leveraged certain open source projects, like you talked about the emergency services kind of. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that experience, consuming and building on top of somebody else's work. And also, how do you feel about, from the work that you've done, do you see some best practices emerging for nonprofits, when it comes to, sort of building some of these workflows, and, how do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Just as an example, if you look at our website repository, we don't just have an open source project so that we can get the free GitHub Actions minutes. The idea is we're building on top of all of these great open source projects. Like I gave you the example of the face blurring project, which we forked, and Shivek added a feature that we could do all of these requests in parallel rather than series, so that it happens much faster. And it's just a simple Python library that takes any photo in and gives you a blurred version of it. And this was very important to us because we knew that we have to balance individual privacy with making sure we are accountable and we share photos, for example. So we're really building on top of this years of effort by other open source people. And like you said, with nonprofits, usually you see there's a lot of manual work. Like I gave you the example of the ATG tax receipts. People usually generate these by hand in an Excel document and then export it as a PDF and then send it to people. And in our case, we would just literally have an Airtable record that we got a donation in. We would manually verify it and move it to a column. And then everything happens automatically. Right? We use an API to send them a message. We use Puppeteer to generate a PDF. And then we use NodeMailer to programmatically email it to them as an attachment. And so the idea was, why stop here, right? We are just volunteers who, for example, I run a technology company in Switzerland. We're only doing this in our free time as a really small way to give back. But there are real nonprofits who we partnered with, for example, for the distribution, who are doing this every day, and they've been doing it for years. So how can we kind of help them with our tech to take it forward? And one really powerful thing we did here was guides. So on our website, you can have a look at all of these free and open source guides that we have written. All of our volunteers have contributed to these. And they tell us about, for example, the face blur and identity protection guide, where you can read why do we want to do this? What parts of a face should we redact? And what technology do we use? How do you install it? How do you use it? And so on. And even like more specific things like our ration kit, how do you assemble it? What should go in each kit? How do you package it? How do you make sure the people who are distributing them are always safe? Or our distribution management guide about how do we manage distributions, our donor lifecycle management guide, where you can have a look at how do we get people to fill the form when we get the donation, what do you do when you don't know who a donor is, how do you send them? So the idea is we wrote all of these in markdown format and put them in our GitHub repository, and you can have a look at all of these, and literally like just things that are not related to the distribution. For example, our social media outreach guide tells you that, hey, we should tell all of the people who have donated about what we're working on. How do you design each social media post? And we made a little template which you just had to edit with the new distribution. And then all of this also is completely automated. So whenever we receive the photos of a distribution, we assign it a social media outreach card also linked to it. So as you can see here, this card is linked to this record. And in that card, we have a little note, just a description about what we did, some photos and a hero image. And all of this works with the same model, where when we have an idea, we upload some photos, we design the graphics, we write the text. And then as soon as we move it to publish to website, this automatically, again, using a GitHub Actions workflow, shows up over here in our updates, and people can share the link. And we also use some automations to automatically tweet about it and so on. And so we've set up all of these systems in place, not for us, but with the idea that using our open source guides and all of our open source code, other nonprofits can build on top of this, or at least just use these to make their manual work much easier. The second quick note is, because of GitHub's powerful platform, we use GitHub Actions, not just for automating things, but also for scheduling cron jobs. And then we use GitHub Pages to deploy our website. This literally means that we don't need a server. We have no DigitalOcean droplet or whatever EC2 instance, because the idea is all of our programmatic, tooling, generation, build time stuff is happening in a GitHub Actions workflow. And so this is very powerful because if you have an open source repo, you get unlimited free minutes, which means all of the other nonprofits that we work with can get all of these great systems in place, literally completely for free, running in GitHub Actions workflow rather than using specific servers that you have to pay for. And so the idea was that with our guides, where we've thoroughly documented everything that we're working on, and with our source code, we don't want it to stop here, that we're done with our part. We want to make sure that other nonprofits and other people can build on top of it, and then make sure that we all do our little part to giving back.
Makes sense. And I think you highlighted a good point around how GitHub Actions really takes away a lot of the burden of maintaining servers, and with the compute being with GitHub, it enables people to quickly be able to really put their you could say their logic into action, and so that's a really great point to highlight. And so a lot of us we all want to help others, and we all have ideas about it, or maybe the desire to help, but not everyone is able to convert that into action. And any words of advice from you for others who really want to give back, and what does it take to really take that the first critical step, or what have been some things that have been important in enabling you to succeed in your efforts?
I think this is kind of a two-way thing, right? There's how do you start, right? You start by starting, and that's what we did. We didn't have a big distribution center or ideas of what we want to do in the future, but we just started with the open source project and thought about, okay, how do we take it forward from here? And I like to start all of my projects like that. If you have a idea, you build a repo quickly and just think about it, and then you kind of take it forward slowly over days and weeks and years. So the gatekeeping is non-existent now. Because if you look at any project like we saw already in GitHub Satellite, there are so many great open source projects that all started as a tiny idea, and you want to build it into an open source product. And if you want to contribute to them, it's become easier than ever, right? There are so many great guides out there about how do you make your first pull request. And there are concepts like good first issue, or up for grabs, where you could filter out issues that need help. And I think, the best way is just to get started. And I'm saying this because usually people watching GitHub Satellite are technical, and the best way to give back could be spend a little bit of your time in giving back to open source projects that you use, or open source projects like ours that are trying to help people during the pandemic. But the second part is really about the distribution and the manual work, right? You can give your time away, you could volunteer to projects, but I think, because for us personally, it's really about privilege, right? It's about the fact that we've been in a lockdown for a year now, and not much has changed. I go to work every day from my laptop. I get a good salary. I write code. I contribute to open source projects. But there are so many, not just tens or hundreds, but thousands and tens of thousands of people out there whose experience has been completely different. Like I said in the beginning, migrant workers here in Delhi who don't know how they're going to feed their family tomorrow, maybe today, but just because their entire job was of the idea that every day we're going to do a little bit of work, earn a little bit of money, and then somebody takes that away from you. So I think it's not just about the technical part of making your first pull request, although that could be very powerful as well. It's about how can you look at your toolkit, right? Are you a designer or a teacher or a student or an engineer, and what you know how to do? And how can you use those tools as a way to give back and do your little part, right? Because when you're talking about this scale, this pandemic, and so many people who we can do something for and who we should have empathy for, every little bit helps. And I think that's why, I started by saying, just start by starting, do your little part, because we're like tiny compared to all of these great open source projects out there. And, with tens of thousands of contributors working from around the world, and of one common good, one common goal that, there's a pandemic and we can spend our free time and do our little part on giving back. And so I think you just start by starting, look at what's out there, and, contact people, see how you can make your first pull request or volunteer or give a little. And like I said, we're a tiny part of it, but every part really counts. And so, I would say you shouldn't feel hesitated at all. Just start by starting, do your little bit, and then see, what kind of impact it can do. For us, it was like a tiny open source project, one repo, and then literally tens of thousands of people now not being hungry, hundreds of thousands of masks to frontline health workers, to police personnel, all in a matter of just weeks, just because we started. Yeah.
Makes sense, Anand. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm just going to echo sort of what you said, which is that, first of all, no effort is small. It's like every little thing that each of us is good at, we can use that to contribute in some way or the other. And today, in the world, we have platforms like GitHub that make it so much easier for people to meet with other people in the community. And you don't necessarily have to start something from scratch. You can join an existing effort because something that you do can contribute and add value. And really, it's a great way to learn and share, and along the way to do some good. So it's just, your story, Anand, has been very inspiring to me for sure. And I hope that it's going to be the same for many others. A great opportunity to use their technical abilities or whatever are their core competencies, and contribute and really start, like you said. It has been a pleasure talking to you, Anand. Your story definitely serves as an example to so many others, and it's great to see that you started, you put this into action, and you leverage tools and technologies to help you do your best work. And I'm really proud to be a hubber and to see how GitHub is playing such a big role in enabling people, and it helps them to make a bigger impact in the world when it matters. So thank you again, Anand, for being here today. And folks, we'll be on, Anand and I will be on discussions right after this. Looking forward to engaging with all of you in some great conversations. Thanks, Anand.